morning. So I come from Croatia. I'm a president of a tiny NGO called Windmill. We actually don't have any windmills in Croatia. We call them wind generators now. In Croatia, you either don't have wind at all or you have too much wind and it will break down. So, the reason why the NGO is called Windmill, the reason why there is an NGO is in 2010 I was accused and arrested, and I don't want to talk about it. And no, everybody heard that story. So I was arrested, and one of the donors called me and said, you know, we would like to fund you. I said, no problem. We are quite happy to receive some funding. And the lady said, okay, send us information about your NGO and we'll wire the money. And I said, well, I don't have any NGOs available. I mean, I'm not an NGO. I mean, I'm more or less alone. There are a couple of crazy friends I do this work with, but we don't have any legal entity to cover us up. Although while I have spent some like 10 days in a police station, so I had plenty of time to think about having a legal entity between me and the government. So we funded an NGO called Windmill, and here it is. And why it's a windmill? It's simply because I strongly believe that, you know, rushing on windmills is a cause. You know, it's not a job. You are either born for it or you're not born. It's like being a journalist or being a teacher or a doctor. You know, it is more or less something which consumes you 24 hours a day, whether you like it or not. So, and I have been running on windmills for a long time. So when I see one, I know I have to start running. So that's it. So that's the story of Windmill very shortly. Currently, I'm in a House of Cards phase, and I could do all this presentation with only House of Cards quotes, but basically, this is the one I want to start because I want to talk to you about some really ugly truths in NGOs and CSOs and so on. So let's begin. So first of all, we did a thing with Croatian state budget a couple of years back, and the reason why we did it is that when you start talking to people, they really don't consider taxes collected as their own money. I mean, you receive your salary every month and you get some sheet of paper, and there are plenty of taxes numbered there and some amounts, but basically you're only interested in amount of money you receive on your bank account. When you talk to a new employer, you will talk about the net amount you are going to receive. How much money will get after my first month working with you? And in my opinion, that's a huge problem, because if you don't feel that taxes collected are your money, then you're not going to ask from the government particular service. You don't know how much money you spend on police, on healthcare, on your pension, or on teachers for your kids and so on, and that's a huge problem. You don't have a relationship with that money, and if you don't have a relationship, you basically don't care about it. You don't hold these people accountable, and that's really important. And I believe we should hold everyone accountable, including NGOs. NGOs, on the other hand, especially in these parts of the world, I would say NGO culture and everything behind it is like an English lawn. You know, you water it, you move it every couple of months, and after 500 years you have a perfect English lawn. And we had like 25 years to do it. So 25 years, it's a little bit more than a single generation, and we are expected to pass all the evolution of civil society, NGOs, you know, organizing, funding, finding a cause, fighting for a cause, losing a cause, everything we had to learn in 25 years. So that's a huge problem by itself. And donors, which basically came to our lands, I would say, they expect us to become self-sufficient at one point in time. They come, they start funding our work, which is nice, of course, and then suddenly there is a crisis somewhere or something new happens. There is a crisis on the east of Europe at the moment, so maybe some money will shift to a little bit more east. Or your country joined the EU, like mine joined in July last year. So suddenly you are not, just because the 1st of July is here, suddenly you are not talking to a guy you talked for like previous 5 years, you are talking to completely other department of some philanthropy or something else. So that's a problem as well. And because local people don't have a feeling for that taxes are theirs, they have very same feeling about NGOs. So someone should do something about it. And by someone, you never mean yourself. And that's a problem itself. The other question I wrote in my notes is that I noticed in last couple of years that NGOs have been renamed to CSOs, and we can talk about it later, but who started this rebranding campaign? Think about it. And the problem is when you have your NGO and you start working and you make some successes and so on, and suddenly at one point in time, you start shifting your main goal, whatever your goal is, either transparency or advocacy or election monitoring or any cause you have, because you have to reapply every couple of months for additional funding and so on, you start picking whatever is on the table at the moment. So NGOs, philanthropy or donors will offer particular boxes, particular fields. We are going to fund monitoring at this point in time. And maybe monitoring is not something you do every day, but suddenly you say, okay, we have done something close to that and we are going to choose this one. And gradually, corruption will never happen overnight. It will happen as a series of consequences, of series of decisions, and suddenly you will discover that your main goal is not your main goal anymore. Your main goal is how to fund yourself for another month, and that's additional problem. And still, there is no basic infrastructure, there are no local donors, there are no local philanthropies, except maybe for particular government funds. And that's a problem in itself, whether you should take it or not take it. And when you move from your original goal to something which is close enough, it's just the first step. And the second step is good enough. And in my opinion, if something is good enough to start working on it, then you have to make it as good as it gets. And compromises are not allowed. So when I pointed out all these facts to Croatian NGOs on Facebook groups or in some meetings we had, they started questioning me whether I'm an NGO man or CSO man, or I actually work for the government, or I'm talking from my position as a private consultant. I make my money as a consultant. And I discovered that this actually created a lot of pain for them, and now I'm working on publishing all financial information for all CSOs in Croatia in the last couple of years, so that will get them started, I believe. I have this habit of insulting demographics by demographics, so CSOs are next. So, as I would say, let's shed some light on transparency people. Maybe they need transparency in themselves, including a windmill, of course. So, and the other hand problem is that, especially if you are into technology, if you have any program or web or whatever you like, maybe your idea is not covered by any of available money sources. And that's a problem. If you have a very small NGO like we do, then usually one of the questions on the form you have, and basically a request for money is very similar to a loan request to your bank. So you have to fill all the things, and you have to fill everything in. You have to fill how many people are working for you. In Windmill, there are no people working for me. We don't have any people employed. We assemble when we are needed. We do something and we disassemble. We are going to reassemble in 6 months or so. So it's not always easy to fill in all boxes, especially if you do technology. Thankfully, thanks to the internet, thanks to the computers, which are increasingly cheaper and cheaper, it's easier and easier to do something even without the money. And on a subject of open governance, I have been specifically asked in the beginning of Open Government Partnership to join the movement, both on a multinational level and by effect to Croatian one. And the problem I discovered there, and while going to different conferences around the world, I discovered that plenty of other people have the same problem, is that usually OGP is just a vehicle for a particular country to look good outside of its own borders. For example, in Croatia, the chairman of OGP is deputy foreign minister. So you can already see from a position of that particular person that OGP is oriented outwards of Croatia, not inwards. And OGP by itself should be very internal thing. What have we done in the last 2 years? Very little. We have an action plan which is impressive if you look at it, but when you start reading action plan points, you will see that most of the statements, most of the actions starts with, in order to create prerequisites for. We are going to do something which eventually in some other time frame will create a result. So in the end, if we inventory all the achievements we have made in OGP in the last 2.5 years, I would say that's changing government behavior in the way that they agree that every law which goes to the parliament will have to pass obligatory process, public discussion. So, and that's a huge win. I mean, there are some NGOs which went, ballistic when that happened. It's like 15 years of victory or something else. But basically, if you know people from the government, you will understand that yes, it was on a wish list of OGP, but it was basically a pure marketing and public relation decisions from the people from the government. It was a quick win for them, and they don't read these discussions anyway. So, and again, if you show your unhappiness or opposition to OGP actions, or you say to them they are too mild or not sufficient, then they ask you again, well, why are you criticizing OGP when you are part of it? Well, I voted no on a meeting. Don't ask me why that happens. So as a result, do we have open data in Croatia? Unfortunately, no. The government is promising a lot, but miracles from the government don't happen too often. On the other hand, what we have done, we have created a blog about data transparency, about transparency movement, about OGP, about everything in Croatian language, which is readable in all surrounding countries. And we are basically trying to build a body of knowledge on the subject for everyone to see. So it's Googleable in local language. And I'm happy to report there are a couple of projects which happened in the meantime. which have been started or at least helped by us in the last couple of months. So, follow your dreams. I said that. I completely missed the slides, I'm sorry. Democrats, we have the change of government, so the current government is more or less ours at the moment. But, you know, you can talk to them, but it's like talking to a wall. And this is my main point, you know. Too much time, I feel like a dog on a picture. I'm constantly trying to do something, and there's simply no response. I constantly try to, you know, to publish some records, to expose something, to, you know, we have done a lot of things, and too often I stand up on the field alone, and I wonder why is that happening. And you have to start asking questions whether what I do and what my colleagues do is actually interesting to anybody. And thankfully there are meetings like this, and there are like 400 people thinking exactly like me. So I'll stop at the moment. I'll be here all day today, and tomorrow I'll be happy to talk with any one of you. Thank you.